The Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is home to over 7.3 million people living within 13 counties. By 2050, the number of residents is projected to almost double. This is in large part due to the pro-business climate of the state and region. Dallas and its suburbs have one of the highest concentrations of corporate headquarters in the United States. North Texas cities vary in size, demographics, and age, and all have unique challenges they will be facing over the next 20 years with this projected growth. This morning we're joined by mayors of 3 distinguished North Texas communities to learn about their perspectives and how they are planning for the future. The city of Frisco incorporated in 1902 and remained a small farming town through most of the 20th century. Frisco began experiencing the rapid North Texas growth in the 1990s and grew by 110,000 people between 1990 and 2010. By 2014, Frisco was the second fastest growing city in the United States at a 6.5% growth rate annually. Frisco took a different economic track than many of the surrounding cities and elected to use a fractional percent of local sales tax to fund the Frisco Economic Development Corporation rather than allocate the funds to the Dallas Area Rapid Transit for transportation. The city has a robust corporate presence with a workforce of 78,000, large retail centers including Stonebriar and Frisco Square, and over $5 billion in capital investment within the 1-mile stretch of the Dallas North Tollway. Frisco has several sporting venues including Toyota Stadium, Dr. Pepper Ballpark, the Dallas Stars hockey team headquarters, the Dallas Cowboys World Headquarters, and an NBA D-League team. As of 2016, approximately 62% of the 68 square miles within Frisco has been developed. Frisco's median age is 37, and median household income is $123,000. Approximately 38% of the population is from a minority race, and Frisco's median single-family appraisal is approximately $353,000. The city of Garland was incorporated in 1891, and from the 1900s to the 1950s, the population remained relatively steady around 2,000 residents. However, by 1960, Garland was experiencing the population boom that the whole country experienced after World War II. And by 1980, Garland had over 138,000 residents. Today, Garland has an estimated population of 235,000 and a 2040 projected population of 285,000. Garland has a rich manufacturing history and is home to close to 400 manufacturers thriving on a tremendous labor force, supportive city services, and the proximity to customers and suppliers. This includes Kraft Heinz and Resistol, the largest manufacturer of hats in the world. Garland has an employment workforce of approximately 118,000. The city of Plano incorporated in 1873, a year after the arrival of the Houston, Texas Central Railroad. For the next decade, the population would only grow to 3,700 residents, but by 1980, the population increased to 72,000 due to the population boom experienced after World War II. Plano's corporate business history began in the 1980s with the creation of Legacy Business Park that brought companies such as Frito-Lay and JCPenney to relocate their headquarters to Plano. Today, Plano has 5 Fortune 1000 headquarters, a workforce of over 200,000, and 30,000 additional jobs in the development pipeline. Many of these developments are part of Plano's new $3 billion Legacy West. Plano's historic downtown has seen a renaissance with the arrival of the light rail station in 2002. Plano is one of the 13 member cities of the Dallas Area Rapid Transit and has 2 light rail stations, a network of bus transit routes, and additional rail stations planned with the future Cotton Belt commuter rail line. As of 2016, approximately 94% of the 72 square miles within Plano has been developed. Plano's median age is 38, and median household income is $83,000. Approximately 44% of the population is from a minority race, and Plano's median single-family appraisal is approximately $326,000.
As you can see, we are very lucky this morning to have the three mayors of these fantastic cities here in North Texas joining us here today. We're going to do a little Q&A, talk a little bit about some of the challenges, and learn a little bit more about some of the growth and challenges that we're all seeing, because these are themes that apply to many different cities here throughout North Texas. As you can see in the video, all of the cities are in different life cycles of their growth. So again, we're very happy to have these mayors with us today. And we're going to start off with you, Mayor Cheney, because you're the furthest away from me, then we're going to bring it in. By the way, these are all recently elected or re-elected officials, mayors of their cities. So we're going to do a little Q&A here on some of the big points that y'all campaigned on. And so Mayor Cheney, one of the most controversial issues in the election in both Frisco and in the area really was urban development. A lot of people talking about all these apartment complexes that were going up. Are they going up too fast? Is it too much? Is it creating too much traffic in the area? And so the question for you would be, do you see this kind of development continuing? What kind of effects has it had in the community? And what do you say to those critics who initially threw out that criticism?
Yeah, I think for us, one of the biggest things we needed to do was first try to educate the public. And so there was a lot of misperception about multifamily living, because you have the historical garden style apartments, that were popular decades ago, versus the new concept that we're seeing today, the new urbanism concepts of urban development, more urban living units. And so, how Frisco is choosing to develop is, we have an urban spine corridor, which is the Dallas North Tollway. That's 10 miles long through our city. And so our design concepts are to stack our density along that urban spine. And so we do feel like that is an appropriate place for those urban living units. Now the reason why, a Toyota will relocate across the country, 4,500 employees to Plano, Texas, is because a lot of the companies today are realizing to compete for talent, you have to be able to deliver that work, live, play balance. That's what the employee and the workforce are looking for today. The employees want to be able to walk to work, or, if they're in their office building, they don't want to go to a conference room for their team meeting. They want to walk down to a coffee shop or into a park. And so those planning concepts are really becoming critical to attract, companies and a workforce and everything. And so we're really trying to develop our urban spine along that way. What we're trying to get away from is the garden style type of apartments that are built near residential areas. Those are the ones that were built decades ago that typically are close to residential, don't have the structured parking, and those are the ones that you tend to see deteriorate after 10, 15 years because there isn't as much reinvestment put into those. And so, for us, it was really educating our public about the difference between the two. And I think most people, as they understand the direction that we're going, are favorable for the urban. Everyone wants, the restaurants and the active and the buzz and those kinds of things that comes along with it.
And you mentioned in your opening remarks that Frisco is 60% built out. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's what you said. And said it was one of the fastest growing cities in the country in the past 10 years. Is that too fast, too soon, though?
It's coming. And so Dallas-Fort Worth, there's the Golden Corridor, which is the Dallas North Tollway and Preston Road, went straight through Plano, came through Frisco, and it's going to keep going. Prosper and Salina are the new frontier that'll develop, here over the next couple of decades. So we as a city are used to it, but with it comes challenges when you're growing that fast. Just keeping up with infrastructure and all the things, that comes with growth. Sure.
Mayor Athas from Garland, I want to sort of talk to you a little bit, because one of the concerns in Garland with your community, and something you talked about during your campaign also, was some of the declining property values there in Garland. Can you explain a little bit about what's going on and some of the challenges with property values in Garland?
Well, we don't technically have declining property values. Everybody's looking at their tax bill and would argue with that right now. But the difficulty over time, just the opposite of Frisco at 57 square miles, we're nearly built out. And we were that proverbial fastest growing city in America back in the 70s. But because so much of that construction was all at the same time, 75% of the homes in my city are below 2,000 square feet. So everybody selling their 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in California for $400,000 is moving to the Metroplex and settling in Frisco, Plano, and other cities. So we don't have that attraction with our housing stock that's necessary. Because there's not that reinvestment into the housing stock, it's not appreciating as quickly as these other communities. So technically, if you look at the growth in other communities and ours, we're not on that same slope. We don't have decline, but it is a difficulty that we have to figure out how to do. And when I talk to people is, because we are built out, we have to learn how to grow within our own skin. And that means really going back and looking at things totally differently. How do you go into neighborhoods and encourage investment? For us, one of the nice things is we have a new traditional neighborhood development coming that I think will set a really good example of what existing neighborhoods can do and what future neighborhoods need to be like.
Okay, very well. Mayor LaRosiliere, welcome. In your first term as mayor, Plano City Council had a lot of contentious decisions that they had to take on. The first was the Equal Rights Ordinance, essentially an extension of the anti-discrimination policy within the city. Also, the adoption of the Plano Tomorrow Comprehensive Plan, which essentially set out a 20-year vision for the city. Dallas Observer coined you as the mayor of suburbia. That was sort of a nickname that you had for a little bit, in part for your advocacy for some of this planning. Talk a little bit about where all of that is now, and maybe we know all residents can't always be happy. Some of the criticism that you've received, even with some of that vision.
Well, Mayor of Suburbia, I've been called worse, so I'll take Mayor of Suburbia. But I think what happens when it comes with the Equal Rights Ordinance or the Comprehensive Plan is sometimes change is difficult for people to grasp, even if it's for the better. Sometimes change is even harder to acknowledge because the Equal Rights Ordinance really didn't change anything in Plano. It just acknowledged that we were a globally diverse and inclusive city, and it was a statement to that matter. The comprehensive plan is laying out a vision for how we're going to continue to grow and be a viable city, very similar to what Mayor Cheney is talking about, some of the mixed-use development and the misconceptions of what multifamily means versus sprawling garden apartments versus more vertical and density and live, work, and play environments. And so what happens often in the public realm is you hear from the noisy minority. 94% of Plano citizens are extremely satisfied with the level of services. We have our surveys, we've done it every year, and I'm still looking for that 6% because I need to talk to them. But 94% are happy. You hear from the 6%, and they're loud, and they made a lot of noise, but all in all, I think we're happy about what we're doing. And as policymakers, leadership, if you look in the dictionary, it's a noun, but I believe it's a verb. Leadership means action. You take action. You do what's in the best interest of your city going forward. For the long term, you'll hear about the people who care about next year, but next year's already baked into the equation. We're really making decisions for the next 15, 20 years.
Sure, okay, great. You all have already touched on this a little bit, but I kind of want to dive into this a little bit more, the topic of economic development and tourism. The one thing that's great about all three of your cities is just how proactive you all have been in bringing so much new business to the area. Of biggest note, obviously, Plano and everything that's going on there, Mayor LaRosiliere. So I want to ask you, and I want to go down the list in case y'all don't already know. We're talking about Toyota North America coming to Plano, Liberty Mutual, Boeing, Coca-Cola. These are big name companies. First of all, what's next and what are you doing that is so successful in getting so many of these big name companies here?
Well, you forgot J.P. Morgan,
Hilti. Right. There's more. I know there are.
Fannie Mae. Let's see who else. I have one more here. Fannie Mae, FedEx.
Yeah,
just
FedEx.
To name a few. There's a few more coming, and we have a few more in the hopper. But really, what the story of Plano is about North Texas. We have terrific communities around us. And when we talk about, Plano's decision was to be the economic workforce and economic epicenter, employment center of North Texas. That's our stake in the ground. We all have value add. So Frisco has entertainment and a lot in tourism, but we could not be successful in Plano if it were not for Frisco, because we're able to talk about what you get if you bring your corporate headquarters here in our city and the cities around us from a housing standpoint, from an entertainment standpoint. And so the biggest challenge for us as Plano is, you heard about Frisco being fastest growing city in America. Well, early 2000s, we were the fastest growing city. So the growth is moving north, and we're a more mature city. We're almost built out. We're about 6% left, and our challenge going forward will be to how to remain as a workforce place, and it's going to be redevelopment, and with redevelopment means additional costs and dealing with the challenges of actually getting the funding to do some of the projects. But what's special about Plano is what makes a community great. The cornerstone is safety, schools, and public service.
Right.
And if you have all those three, and then the last one is kind of a, you don't really know, you can't put your finger on it, but you know you don't have it. It's called quality of life, and it's just a combination of all those encompassed with mobility, housing, entertainment. And so we have that right mix right now, and we're happy to be part of what's happening in North Texas.
Great. Mayor Athas, we know that in Garland, manufacturing is sort of a big deal there. Of course, Hatco Factory, that's synonymous with the idea of manufacturing in Garland. How important is it for you all to sort of continue to recruit that type of business to Garland and to keep some of those workers there in your city?
Well, we have so many people that actually commute into Garland to work, and we have a lot of our citizens, of course, that work within the city limits. We're a little bit unusual in having that large workforce. Workforce employment and training is very critical to us. With about 400 manufacturers, as the video talked about, we are sending products all over the world. There's a lot of things manufactured in Garland that are available nowhere else except in Garland. In fact, if you look at the deepest holes on the planet or the furthest satellites from the planet, there will be a product that was made in Garland. So we're very proud of that. We work pretty hard to support the existing businesses, but to keep growing. And a lot of our advantages are still diversifying that manufacturing base, but supporting the ones that we have. We sit at a very critical position, like next to 635. There's products made in Garland that are going to the GM manufacturing plant in Arlington that has to be delivered exactly on time. So this whole system of working with the Metroplex, and I'm glad that Mayor LaRosiliere mentioned this, but the cities all work very closely together. Transportation is extremely important. That's something that we all work very closely on. So that manufacturing base that we have is dependent upon what our sister cities are doing, as well as what we're doing. And we spend a lot of time having our own power company has been exceedingly helpful to supporting our local manufacturing base.
Right, okay, great. Mayor Cheney, 5 billion mile, brilliant sort of marketing tool here in Frisco. And as of recently, if y'all have been paying attention, Frisco seems to be making a name for itself as a sports town, kind of a sports hub with everything that's going on around here. Talk a little bit about how sports is becoming such a sort of economic driver here in this fast-growing city.
Yeah, so sports in Frisco actually started with a small investment, which was a velodrome, which is a small stadium for cyclists to ride around. But it was Frisco's kind of putting the toe in the water. And then that led us to do a deal with the Rough Riders, which is the AA affiliate of the Texas Rangers, who built a stadium here in Frisco. And then we learned from those successes and kept building on it. And from that came Toyota Stadium, which is where FC Dallas plays, and we have another stadium where our D-League basketball plays. And what's happened with these investments in sports just over the last decade is it's created an incremental effect, a snowball effect, so to speak. And so a lot of families that value sports and are active families move to Frisco for that reason. And then you see the influence all the way throughout the community. So even at the youth sports level, we have some of the most advanced training for youth sports. Ex-athletes are moving to Frisco to train kids because I guess there are parents crazy enough to pay for it, me being one of them, here in our city. I mean, my son, one of my sons, when he was 7 years old, could tell the difference between a two-seam and a four-seam fastball when he was batting. And I played baseball in high school, and I could never do that. So that's the level of training that happens here. And now, because of that, now companies that are investing in sports or in the sports field are now moving to Frisco. So it's created this synergy And there really is kind of a business around sports. In fact, we have a tech incubator here in our community, and there's just so much sports-related business that now they're shifting their focus to be incubation for only the sports field. And so it's become a critical industry for us, and it just started with a small velodrome, teaching the community how sports can help drive business, and now we have 6 sports that are represented here in Frisco. We're the only city in the country, believe it or not, that has representation from 6 different sports, and we're working on the 7th, so stay tuned.
Well, you've got a bowl game coming to Toyota Stadium also. I mean, talk a little bit about that and how you score something like that. That's a big deal.
So at one of our council work sessions, we were discussing, it was probably about 8 or 9 years ago, how we can better use these facilities to get more events here. And I'm a Longhorn grad. I went to UT, and so at the time we had another council member that went to OU. And so our big idea was, before the Texas OU weekend, we wanted to have a baseball game here in Frisco to start driving people. Maybe some people would start staying here. Well, that didn't happen. I actually made the calls to the athletic directors. Believe it or not, the OU athletic director said yes. My alma mater, UT, said no. But our EDC went to work, and they landed a Division I championship game, which has been a huge economic driver for our community, delivering millions of dollars of economic impact. You know, North Dakota State played in it for 5 years in a row, I think, and I think their entire city came to Frisco every single year. And so that's been a big driver. And then now with that success, we just added the Frisco Bowl, which is a new bowl game that'll be played here this year. We're excited about that. And with our successes, the NCAA has been looking at Frisco as a destination for a lot more championships for them. So.
Well, congratulations on all that success. That sounds very exciting for the people of North Texas, and of course here in Frisco. Housing and transportation, I want to talk to you a little bit about that, and we're going to start off with you again, Mayor Cheney, at the end and come back down. We've seen the boom, we've talked about it ad nauseum now at this point, but you've got the amount of services here, the infrastructure with parks, amenities, the things that each household requires. How are you keeping up with the development when it comes to providing, and we talked about the apartments, but we're talking about homes for sale, houses for families, and how to get them around. What's that like? What's that dynamic like when you sit down with developers and try and explain to them that you're working out some kind of a plan to get that done?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges we face as a community. I mean, if we go around and talk to our residents about what the number one concern is, it's traffic, you know, and getting around. And usually when I talk to a resident, they're like, I love Frisco, love everything about it, and that's usually the one but for. And so we're working on that aggressively. I mean, it's a challenge. You can only put down so much pavement, you know, and pavement isn't always the solution to your traffic needs. It's working with your business parks and getting people around. Of course, we don't have mass transit like Plano does, but we're looking forward to the transportation systems of the future. I mean, we believe strongly that the way people get around 10 years from now will be dramatically different. Just with the autonomous vehicles, autonomous systems like buses that are coming along, the ride-sharing programs, third party like Uber and Lyft. We're talking to developers now coming out to community that are rethinking how they design their developments, where they want to take their parking garages and build those so that they can be repurposed in the future, where they can eventually be turned into office buildings, because they don't think 20 years from now there'll be as much need for the parking ratios that you have today, just because of these changes. So when we're a community that's only 60% built out, knowing that a large part of our commercial corridor is going to be built out over the next 20 years, we have to be thinking in that mindset. We can't be thinking in the mindset of the transportation systems of today. Like we have to be thinking about 20 years from now.
The dynamic's a little bit different in Garland, Mayor Athas, and I wanted to sort of bring that one up to you because Garland has seen its boom several decades ago. So I'm just wondering what kind of rehabilitation efforts might be taking place, or redevelopment efforts, to kind of maybe get into some of these older neighborhoods, get them a little bit more, current and connected to some of the lifestyle changes that are going on with your neighboring cities.
Well, actually, we're doing quite a bit. It is a big challenge. When people have lived in their home for 40 years or close to that, and basically what they've come to know is what they come to expect. And trying to show people that there's opportunities that are a little bit different, that there's opportunities to improve neighborhoods. That's a huge challenge. We started addressing that several years ago when we formed our neighborhood department. We spend a lot of time and a lot of effort on trying to work with neighborhoods to help them to understand their opportunities. And in fact, there's a summit this weekend that we're doing with the city of Plano where we invite neighborhoods to come and learn more about the opportunities. But we're looking at densities, we're looking at all the opportunities in the areas that we still have. It's a huge challenge, and I don't exactly have the right answer, but I know that when we find it, we'll be the first city that did.
Very well. Mayor LaRosiliere, in Plano, with all the companies that are coming in, and the workforces that are coming in from across the country, you've got sort of a very interesting situation where you've got all these people from different parts of the country coming into Plano at the same time. Perhaps culturally, their way of getting around differs a lot. Maybe they're coming from places where they have good metro systems, places where they're just used to driving, or walkable cities. When you get such a mix of so many people coming to Plano, and maybe they know life a little differently from wherever it is that they come from, how are you going to appeal to all of them and make this a place that is a home for all of them, where they feel comfortable not only living there, but also, again, when we talk about transportation in the area, there's going to be so much movement there. Is that something you guys think about often?
Absolutely. It's a multi-pronged approach. Number one, the existing infrastructure, we have to maintain it. So we've made significant investments in terms of widening our roads, working with our traffic signals, being more automated in terms of the lighting, the lights, to be kind of a smart city in a sense where it's traffic driven. We're really looking at innovative ways on that. Secondly, it's the planning component of something you all here can appreciate has a lot to do with that. For example, our urban mixed-use areas and urban centers, and creating density around the corporate area actually helps relieve traffic. So in our Legacy West area, for example, the folks that live in those apartments don't get on the highway. They live and play very close within their employment center. We have over 100,000 people that work in our Legacy Business Park. During the day, 70,000 people come into Plano, so we are a net importer of jobs in our city. We did a study that showed that 40% of almost 90% of the people, 99% of the people that come into Legacy Business Center, single driver, one person in the car. But 40% of them are willing to do something different. And so if we can find a way to adapt to those 40%, and like Mayor Cheney said, it's not putting down another lane, not putting down more concrete, because that means more cars. It's really looking at transportation for the future, autonomous cars, ride sharing. We happen to have DART, so we want to leverage that as best we can, increase some of the routes, and just kind of chip away at the edge to make that work for them.
We're staying on the topic of mass transportation because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here is for the future, but in the time being, those options are not fully available to everyone just yet. On the topic of mass transportation, I want to read something to you, an interesting fact here in my notes. 1983, back in 1983, the citizens of 15 different communities, they voted to levy a 1% sales tax to join the Dallas Area Rapid Transit System, DART. The cities of Flower Mound, Coppell, they pulled out in 1988, so the system, it's only got 13 cities today, including Plano and Garland, two of the cities that are represented up here today. And I wanted to ask you, Mayor Athas, the benefits of having DART in Garland. What has that been like to keep that system in your city?
We've actually had 2 elections to pull out of DART. And both times the citizens, by overwhelming majorities, 80%, almost 90%, voted to stay in DART. DART provides us a lot of services. We don't get the 4A, 4B taxes that non-DART cities have available. But on the other side of it, if you look at the DART cities, they have been very, very successful. So DART has had an element of success for all of us. For us, DART provides a lot of routes, a lot of bus routes. We do have 2 stations. When the DART station downtown opened, I was on that proverbial first train into Garland. A month later, I was able to go to Plano and be there on their opening day too. So our side of the region grew out very quickly with DART. The number of advantages and trying to expand DART, I think, is something that's very critical for the system and for all of us working together going forward. And for us, DART has provided that integral backbone that the citizens wanted, and I'm a strong DART supporter.
And I think so many other people are. I wanted to ask Mayor LaRosiliere about DART member cities. They've kind of somewhat drawn their lines in the sand, many of them in this debate between a downtown subway versus a suburban rail debate. What I'm thinking, what I'm wondering here is what the city of Plano's position on this topic is as far as when we look at the future of DART and the accessibility to some of these services for your community.
So sometimes on the road of doing what's right for community, politics gets in the way. And so I think we experienced that to a certain degree. A couple council members in Dallas versus attempted to make it a Dallas against a suburb issue, but that's really not the case. We're stronger together, and we all know that. So that issue was really related to the Cotton Belt, which will happen. It's going to come to Plano and Richardson, and that means you're going to be able to take the DART train from Plano all the way to DFW. And so mass transit is important. It's part of that solution for the future. Okay, we've all heard about this little company called Amazon, right? That's thinking about a relocation. Yeah. One of the primary number one keys on their RFQ is mass transit. So if you don't have that, you're not even viable. And so as a community, we've seen what the impact of DART in our downtown. You saw it in the video, talked about the Renaissance. The idea of mass transit is part of being visionary, it's part of planning, and you don't build DART because there's a lot of people and there's a cost saving today. You build it because the people are coming, or DART or mass transit. You build it because they're coming, because by the time they're here, if you try to build it, it's too late. So it's really about being visionary, and that's what we're elected to do.
Right, okay. Mayor Cheney, we know that Frisco is not a DART community. Y'all use your 1% for economic development. Is that going to change at all? I mean, how are you feeling about this now? Obviously, these were decisions that were made before your time. Sure. But as you continue to sort of focus on the growth, what do you think? You think you might have a change of heart at your city council?
Well, Frisco right now, we're at a different phase of our growth than Plano and Garland are, where they're closer to being built out. We're still very much a developing community with lots of open spaces. So where we are in our life cycle, that 4A, 4B money is what's growing our community. It's what's bringing the business here to Frisco. It's what's helping us build these amenities that we're building, like the stadiums and so forth. And so that's a critical component of ours, and something that Frisco is very passionate about, how we allocate those funds. Now, as Frisco continues to build out, there will be a day that comes where the ROI on 4A, 4B may not be the same. That as we get built out, we've built out the regional parks, we don't need the CDC money as much anymore. We have more sales tax where we can't give it as much to economic development. And so I think as we start phasing and growing through our community, then at that point, we will start shifting some of those resources. And I think it'll be great for Frisco because, again, I think 10 years from now, the transportation systems are going to be completely different. Now, we've preserved the commuter rail line through Frisco should we ever choose to use commuter rail. So that has been preserved with transit-oriented developments and rail lines where they can be planned out. Me personally, I don't think that line will ever be used. I think when Frisco is ready to start looking at mass transit options, there's going to be new options available, and whether that's DART that's providing them or other entities. Yeah. I think we're going to be in a unique position to take advantage of the latest technologies when we're ready for them. I'm
curious as to when you think you'll be ready for them, just because we've talked so much about the fast growth. What are you thinking? Can you put a ballpark figure on that?
We're already exploring options right now for some of our more concentrated areas. So like our $5 billion mile, where most of our commercial growth is happening right now, we're already looking at people mover concepts, around sure. those developments. And so, it is happening today as far as that planning. Now, as far as having bus lines and those kinds of things. Frisco is not ready for that today.
When we talk about mass transit, and this is just an open question to either of you mayors, do you try and model after any other city, maybe outside of Texas? I mean, who's really good at mass transit right now that you think we could learn from here in North Texas?
Well, there's quite a few examples. Washington, D.C., to me, is very stellar. Everybody rides mass transit in Washington, D.C. We don't have anywhere near the densities that Washington, D.C. does. In fact, if you look across the Metroplex, our densities compared to most mass transit areas is extremely low. There's a new concept that people are talking about, bus rapid transit. Sometimes I think people want to talk about bus rapid transit and they start saying that this will be a new opportunity and things of that nature, but I would be very, very cautious in taking that attitude. There's a few cities that have done bus rapid transit really well. Cleveland is the best example that I can think of, but they built it in an existing corridor, and it's been extremely helpful to revitalizing that corridor. And Cleveland was in a position that they needed revitalizing at the same time. Other areas have tried bus rapid transit, and it's not been as successful as they had hoped it would be, because at the end of the day, when people invest and they want to build things, they don't mind building around the rail line because the rail line is not going to move. People are afraid that bus lines will move, so attracting investment around any kind of bus line is difficult. And so I throw that out there because this is something that comes up in North Texas, and people often think that this is a magic solution to something. You have to really think about it. Now, Albuquerque is putting in bus rapid transit right now from the downtown out to the university, and I think they're going to be very, very successful. Again, because they chose a route that they could sustain that system in that particular environment. And so you have to look at it very closely. It would not be building bus rapid transit out through open fields and things of that nature.
Right. My answer to that is really thinking, not so much looking at what other cities done, but to be innovative. So for example, early next year, what you'll see in Plano is a seamless app that'll allow you to ride DART and Uber and Lyft. So for example, one of the challenges we have in our business sector is having service workers. Housing costs and transportation make it tough for a lot of our corporate headquarters to have some of the folks working in there, restaurants and such. And so we're trying to bring them into the city, but the traffic and the transportation is a challenge. So for example, in a few months, you'll be able to ride DART, say from Dallas. On one app, you'll order your Uber, and it'll take you to the last mile, so to speak, in Plano, and the Uber car will be waiting for you to take you to your final destination. You pay it in one place, one app. And then to extend that, if there is a cluster of people working in an area, maybe it's not one person riding an Uber, it's 4 of them riding on an SUV or 6 of them, and that way it's 6 people in a car versus 1. And it allows less cars on the road, more people to get around. So I think, again, looking in the future, it's not so much what's happened in the past as how can we adapt to what's going to happen.
And I'll just add that I'm fascinated by reading what Dubai is trying to do with their transportation systems. I'm trying to plan a trip to get out there to see them firsthand. Frisco will actually be the first city in the country that uses Uber Elevate. And if you haven't heard of Uber Elevate, it's essentially the Jetsons, and it's coming, which is flying pods that are going to take people all over town. And so, here from where we're sitting today to get to the airport, it's about a 25-minute drive if there's not bad traffic. Uber Elevate will get you to your terminal in 7 minutes. And so that's coming, and it'll be tested here in Frisco in 2020 and then commercially rolled out, I believe, in 2022. But how they're planning their city, like we've been talking about with this panel for the future, as far as even their building designs, where they're building their structures to accommodate cars that are dropping off the person at the doorstep and then go self-park, those kind of concepts. So those are the things that I find fascinating as far as how we should be planning for the future, and I think they're a model city for us all to be looking at.
So if I could just jump in,
Sure.
Uber Elevate is essentially a drone. You'll be able, you fly into.
It's amazing to think of
But
all of this
and that's
stuff.
happening.
Isn't it?
That's 3-4 years away. So you fly in from wherever in your DFW. You'll get in a drone. It'll be able to hold anywhere from 4 to 5 people. It'll take you to your destination, say Frisco. We're also looking at that in Plano. And then ultimately what will happen is it'll drop you off at a landing spot, and then you'll have an autonomous car take you to your final destination. That's what's going to happen in the next 5 to 7 years. It's not another car. It's not getting a car service. It's going to be 8-10 minutes from the airport, autonomous car waiting for you, autonomous Uber, autonomous Lyft, take you to your business meeting. You're there in 10 minutes.
To these points, because all of this, I mean, I think we can all agree. I mean, this sounds fascinating that this is something that's so close by.
You're in a room full of planners.
They're already building the city already.
Know
I see
about
some
this
people
already? Am I
making
just the only one sitting up here thinking, whoa? But it begs the question, at least in my mind, how big of a challenge is it going to be to sort of break through the culture of people who like to drive trucks, like to drive their cars, and have just been so used to this here in Texas? I mean, how do you convince these folks to leave that and to order Uber Elevate? I mean, I'm sure that's something that you think about as well, right?
I'll start with that. I think it's, again, we talked about earlier, change is something you either help, you're part of the change, or you acknowledge the change. It's happening. The workforce that's coming into Plano is basically the millennials, and they're the fastest growing demographic. Sure. It used to be baby boomers. Interesting thing that's happening, the baby boomers are dying off and the millennials are growing. And so it's the fastest growing demographic. They're not getting driver's license. It's the lowest percentage of, I think, 18-year-olds with driver's license since they've been tracking it. Right. Because they're used to Uber and Lyft in the rideshare economy. And so it's not a question, again, about who's here, it's about who's coming. And so by the time that it's here, we as policymakers have to think about that. And we'll deal with the political flack on that, because we'll hear from the people that are here now. But in order for us to truly help everyone here do their job, is to encourage them to think like the Jetsons, and then let us deal with the political heat of implementing that.
Fair enough. Did you want to add something, Mayor Cheney?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, people, at least here in Texas, they make transportation decisions based on convenience. And, today it's very auto-centric because that's the most convenient mode of transportation for most people. But it's quickly changing. So as soon as another alternative becomes more convenient, like I would have never thought of taking a taxi to dinner 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. But today I use Uber all the time because I know I can pull up my app and it be at my door in 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. Or even to go down the street to watch, to go to a Jimmy Buffett concert here in Frisco is literally 5 miles from my house. Never would have taken a taxi 5 years ago. Now I wouldn't even think about driving my car down there. So because these third-party services has made it more convenient for me to do so. And so that's always been kind of the argument with mass transit, I think, in many ways, is that there's less ridership because of the convenience factor. How do you get people to the last mile of their destination? As DART's being innovative now to add the third-party component to solve that last mile concept. And as it becomes more convenient, more and more people will use it.
Yeah, they have to feel the pain of what they're doing to change. There has to be a pain there, and they're starting to feel it for them to look for an alternative.
I think there really is a perception by a lot of people that this is coming slowly. It'll be here by 2040. It's going to be here almost tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right.
And
3-4 years.
Understanding that, millennials will adapt very quickly. My son, when he was taking driver's ed over the summer, was concerned that my wife and I wouldn't be home to take him to driver's ed school. I said, well, just take Uber to get there, son. And now he's very convinced that he loves driving. He never wants to have an autonomous car because he loves driving. But people think that the first generation autonomous cars, they'll be sitting over there in the other seat, letting the car drive, and they'll be on their phone doing Facebook or something of that nature. That's not true. They're going to have virtual reality goggles on. They're going to be exploring the rest of the world. They're not even going to be in that car. And by the second generation of autonomous cars, which will probably be like 1 year later, you'll be strapped in a whole virtual reality cocoon. You won't even have goggles on.
Yep.
So the changes that are coming, people really don't envision. But it goes back to even what a lot of the people in this room represent. Are we going to build houses with garages in the future? Do we need garages in the future? We used to subscribe to a car, we own a car. The changes that are coming are going to be very, very dramatic, and I think people will adapt to it very quickly. I think that's part of our society. We do adapt pretty quickly. Grandmas use Facebook.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I've seen some garages around North Texas. Yes, they do. The garage may still hold value as extra storage if you've seen some of the ones that are around here. Gentlemen, I want to ask you the theme of this conference that we're all here for, the art of planning, uniting diverse perspectives. We are all living in an age right now where it is fair to say that there is a good amount of distrust where anywhere from anyone using a social media platform could put information out there. Whether it's Nextdoor, Facebook, they can say anything, whether it's correct or not. This then spurs debate and controversy sometimes. I'm wondering what advice you might have for this room of planners, other elected and appointed officials. When these things happen, how do you help and unite some of the perspectives? Because these are things that are out of your control. They just kind of happen. Maybe you wake up to it, it's already happening, and now you have to address it. So what kind of advice would you give when maybe something like this happens? Everyone's got a platform, everyone's got an opinion, it feels like.
Yeah, anyone with a cell phone these days is now a reporter.
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
Apparently. But Harry alluded to it earlier, which is, I think the best piece of advice I ever received as an elected official was, you cannot govern to the vocal minority. And that is a challenge that all of us have, it's all the planners have, that the story that was told is if one person shows up to speak against something, then you've got a problem. If two people show up to speak against something, you have a movement. And if three people show up, then it's a mandate. And those may be the only three people in the community that feel that way, but they're in the audience, and so a lot of people fall into that trap of governing to those. And so, that's probably the biggest piece of advice I would give is, trust in what you're doing. If you're doing things the right way, then, that's what I always say as an elected official. I'm gonna do right and suffer the consequences. Is how I would challenge it. But then as far as the communication strategy with Facebook, we as a city, for a long time, in my opinion, we're playing too much defense communication, that we would wait for something like this to happen and then be like, oh, now we need to respond to it, those kinds of things. And we have dramatically changed our entire communication department, that we are going to tell our story and be on the offense at all times, which is if we get our story out, our message out, then that is what people will be talking about.
It goes back to transparency.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes.
And so that's probably in my first 5 months of mayor, I spent more time in our communication department than any other department, as far as we want to be front and center, getting our story, our message out. And then when you go to Facebook and you go to then your citizens are telling that story, because in absence of information, then the vacuum gets filled by the one person with a cell phone that now is the reporter, and people start following that message. And so, those are probably the two biggest things I'd give.
So
You called them the noisy minority
the
earlier.
noisy minority. So to Mayor Cheney's point, when I was elected in 2013, we at the city essentially had no social media presence. And prior to my election, I was the first elected official, at least in Plano, that used social media as part of my campaign. So, I extended that to the city, and we've made a real concerted effort to increase our presence for that same reason. Number one, being proactive, getting our story out, just getting the message out. So we're meeting people and touching them where they are. For example, I was on city council, we used to have these quarterly roundtables where we'd go to a library in the north, south, east, and west area of our city. And we'd have more staff members than people show up. And then we'd have like 28 staff members, and we'd have 14 people. It's the same 14 people that went everywhere, and they had their same issues. And now we have virtual town halls.
Yeah.
So those 14 people could still come. Some of them have passed away by now, so there's like 7 of them. But then we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we do outbound calls, and the participation level in our town halls have grown exponentially as a result, because we're touching them where they want, in the manner that they want to get, and reaching them in that manner. And so, so being proactive, using social media to our advantage as a mode of communication is the way you do that.
I think it's also important to talk about a few of the essential things that we need to always keep in mind as cities. Participating in social media, of course, today is very important, because so many people almost get no news except through social media. But there's words constantly being added to the Oxford Dictionary of the English language, and I think one of the next words to be added will be fake news. And it's almost inconceivable that we would be out there talking about fake news all the time. But I guess it is a label that lets us try to identify what's realistic and what's not. And it's so critical that we as cities and we as individuals, and particularly as public officials, have that integrity with our public, that we can always be relied on to be telling the truth. And to me, that's probably the highest challenge that we have, is to maintain that level of integrity. And I work with elected officials all across the Metroplex, and I think Dallas-Fort Worth has some of the best individuals serving in public office that you can imagine. These are people that I talk to all the time and I trust intimately. And for them to be able to go back to their communities and carry that word of truth, I think is extremely critical. So almost no matter what happens on social media, a lot of times it comes back to the truth. They'll go back to the sources that they trust. And maintaining that trust is the most difficult, but the most important thing that we do.
And I'll let you know that us in the news, social media has changed the game for us as well. So we're also very plugged into whatever it is that's coming out of your cities, because that's where we get a lot of news ideas from. So, just be mindful of that, we're also watching, keeping real close tabs on what's going on here. Before we wrap this up, Mayor Athas, I did want to talk to you about, because you've talked about transparency, you've talked about getting information out there, and you have recently been very vocal about your current situation as mayor of Garland. I just wanted to ask you that because we're talking about the challenges of growth and redevelopment, and as the news says in recent times, it's this recent decision in Garland to essentially raise an armory and build a skate park in its place that has now led to your decision to resign as mayor. Is that correct?
Yeah, tell us about that.
If what I said was wrong, please tweak it.
Well,
I don't want to be called fake news. What's the deal
You
here?
got 20 minutes. Me and Mayor Cheney are going to just shut up and let you go.
Just felt like we should address it briefly, if you don't mind, Mayor.
Well, the truth is that right after the vote to tear down our armory, which is a multi-million-dollar building, we were just going to take it off the tax rolls, or not the tax rolls, but the city's assets, just tear it down, put a skate park there, without doing any research on skate parks, without asking the neighbors, without asking the Parks Department, without asking the Parks Board, without talking to the police or anybody else. The city's council, by majority vote, decides to plop it right down there. I did make my announcement that I will be resigning, but that's not the reason for my resignation. Like I said, I will be announcing early next year. My purpose is to have an election, citywide election, in May. And the only way that I can force that to happen is to put my name, my position on the ballot.
Because you have single-member districts.
We have
right?
single-member districts. In even number of years, we only have 4 districts. So it's a very low turnout election. And you can imagine. On odd number of years, we have citywide elections because the mayor's position's up, because we elect our officials every 2 years. We have a charter review process going on right now that the city council insisted that they wanted to have. The charter review's met twice, and they don't even know what they're meeting about. We've given them no charges. Someone's going to start slipping in those charges, and the citizens need to be paying attention. And the best way to have everybody in the city paying attention is to have the candidates talking about it and to have everyone looking. What do I give up doing this? I'm not really a martyr, because I only give up a year, and I've already accomplished all the major goals that I set out to do as a mayor. And those were billion-dollar goals: getting funding for 635, taking on the North Texas Municipal Water District, which Harry and I have been very, very out there on, and very critical to our cities, and changing that. But bringing more development. Y'all have the billion-dollar mile. I've got the $2 billion quarter mile. Data centers on both sides. So, I mean, not that many jobs, not that many opportunities. I like y'all's.
A lot of electric fees, though, right? Electricity fees.
So my purpose really in offering my resignation is to force this citywide discussion about things. And I have to say, I have 20 years experience. I've now been on the city council as a council member and the mayor longer than anyone in the last 75 years. Before we changed our charter many years ago, we did have a mayor that served, or council member mayor served for 14 years. So I'm second now in the history of Garland. But it's important in that experience, the things I've seen, and 10 years ago, and it didn't get a whole lot of publicity, but we had a city council that actually 5 people said, you know, we've got our block, we can do anything we want. We're just not going to have elections this year. We're just going to stay in office another year and just go on and save the citizens the cost of an election. Democracy should pay for several things. Number one is elections. And my attorney, Michael Young from Strasburger Price, is here today. I really want to call him out because his strategy, taking us to the district court 10 years ago, and having the courts come back in 22 hours and say, what, are you nuts? You have to have an election. And they did, and unfortunately I made some bad decisions in those days and ended up being on the city council and the mayor, but try to counsel young people, don't make bad decisions. So this is an opportunity. I've seen what's happened in the past. When people get this control, they put together as a clique and they quit listening to their citizens. That's bad. But I tell my council members, I said, you have to understand. They go, what are you doing in my district? I go, you have to understand, you're in my city. Every citizen has 2 representatives. If you will not represent them, the mayor will.
Sure.
And that's what I'm doing.
I appreciate your candidness, some of the the business behind the gig, behind the politics. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us this morning. I think we've had a very enlightening conversation. I think the folks here today, and I think I see some more Astros fans that sort of made their way into the room since we started. But round of applause for the mayors of Frisco, Garland, and Plano.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Thank you.